Welcome to the Go One More Step podcast. I'm Brian White. I'm a veteran, I'm a survivor of my brother's suicide, and I'm talking to people about overcoming challenges of all kinds.
So here we are, Andy Robinson, father,
Hey.
husband, financial wizard, veteran, who has dealt with some stuff
Yeah,
and has faced some difficulties in life. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. It's good to connect.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're into almost double-digit episodes, and you're the second fellow veteran I'm talking to. So I've got a good range, but this is what started it, and you were high on the list the whole time. So thank you very much for taking the time and being willing.
Yeah,
Because
man, appreciate it. Thanks for, reaching out and wanting to have me on. And it's really excited to connect and kind of share some stories today.
yeah, so why don't we jump right into it? Let's
Mhm.
share your story. So I very deliberately, after we last spoke, listed father, husband, financial wizard, veteran, and also wounded veteran last.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that is based on what you've told me in our last conversations, and I really kind of like that, and we're going to unpack that.
Mhm.
But if you could, let's lay out for those that are going to be watching what happened.
Right. Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I served in the Marine Corps, right? We served in the Marine Corps together.
Yep.
In 2001, I joined the Marine Corps, and I did 2 deployments to Iraq. And on the second one, towards the end of the deployment, it was 2006.
Yep.
I was on a vehicle patrol, and my truck was attacked by an IED, or roadside bomb. And it was pretty significant. Ripped the front half of the truck off. 3 Marines died pretty much instantly. And I had a myriad of injuries, and some that eventually healed, but some that stuck around. So, um, but broke my legs and my ribs and my vertebrae. But the main thing really that kind of happened was my spinal cord got injured. So then that caused me to be a quadriplegic. So I'm paralyzed like from the chest down, and I have some impairments in my arms and my hands, but I can like move my hands and stuff like that. But yeah, so I got injured June of 2006. I spent, I think, 6 or 7 months inpatient in hospitals.
Yep.
And then, spent a good amount of time after I got out of the hospital, just continuing to pretty much focus on rehabilitation, just going there several times a week to work out and work with a therapist and stuff like that. But yeah, that was quite a while ago. So
So yeah, God, coming on 13 years now, huh?
yeah, something like that, right?
Yeah,
2006, I think more than that, like
yeah,
17, 16, 17.
16, 17. Yeah, God, time sneaks up
Yes,
and rushes by us.
right.
So how long were you unconscious and or unaware of
Right.
the extent of the injuries and everything else?
Right. So, I don't know about unconscious, because from everyone I speak to that was there that day, I was conscious the whole time. But thankfully, I don't remember
Yeah,
any of it. I remember like that morning waking up. I remember then I was with Marines that I had only met that day. They were basically giving me and my interpreter a ride
yeah,
in their convoy. So it's not like I knew these guys for a long time. Um, but I remember like starting the vehicle convoy and driving around, and I think we might have stopped once or twice before everything hit the fan. I don't remember that part though, and I don't remember. I start like fading in and out. Like I know I have some memories that are like really weird. They seem like lucid dreams, kind of reality. You have to realize like my lungs had collapsed. They were trying just to get me to breathe again on my own. I never had a ventilator, which is great. I'm so happy about that. But um, Definitely a couple weeks before I start to like really remember like being in Bethesda and remember like my wife and my parents and doctors being around and stuff like that. So definitely several weeks before I start to come to enough to that I remember, you know.
Right. And pretty much immediately at that point, you got to start processing a new reality.
Yeah, it was definitely like a progression. It
Mhm.
wasn't you know, I know plenty of people with spinal cord injuries, and a lot of them have had the way they sustain their injury, they're very like conscious, and it's like, hey, like I know you're in the hospital right now, you're in a hospital bed, you might notice that you can't move your legs, like this is a thing.
Right.
For me, it's a little bit different because it was them putting like a CPAP mask on me to help like push my lungs to start doing that. My legs were so jacked up that that was a lot. So I don't have like an aha moment, like when I remember like either my wife or my parents or my doctor or a chap or anybody telling me, hey, you know, Andy, this is the lifelong injury you have.
Right.
Nothing like that. But you know, that new reality of like just trying to breathe. So, but yeah, that starts to set in, and then it was just like solving one thing after another. So it was, you know, once I didn't have to go through all the breathing treatments, then it was, you know, making sure my legs healed okay, and then it was like I hadn't moved for so long that my shoulders had started to like develop scar tissue, and so it was just getting range of motion back. And so it's just, yeah, everything starts new, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, so it sounds almost like the path that it took, whether by design or accident, kept you focused on small tasks rather than the enormity of the situation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And weirdly, I'm kind of thankful for that, the way that
Yeah.
progression at least played out, right? Because it wasn't just a, oh crap, how am I going to live my life? I can't do this. It was, well, I'm breathing today. That's cool. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like they can take the chest tubes out because you know, my lungs are working and they're not like just sucking up fluid that's going to try to kill me. So, you know, having it kind of progress that way just allowed me to, you know, already have some wins, you know, some
Yeah.
little wins to go. And it was like, all right, well, it's going to keep getting better. I'm sure it'll stop getting better at some point, but there's more stuff to do.
So the stacking up the small wins is something that I really kind of focus on.
Yeah.
Regardless of whatever the enormous thing is the solve one problem at a time. Do you think it's almost a chicken egg question? Because it sounds like you've been doing that since, right? Like
Right.
stacking up the wins and focusing on the steps and solving one thing at a time. Do you think that shaped that, or do you think that your attitude shaped that as much as that shaped your attitude?
I think it was more so like I was in that situation and that's how it played out and that's what it taught me. Because
Yeah.
I mean, I was 23 when it happened, so
Right.
let's be realistic about
Yeah.
my ability to to really like, you know, put thought process and rationale together at that time. But I don't remember really having that kind of methodical, um, you know, way of looking at things.
Uh,
I was a 23-year-old, 22-year-old, 23-year-old Marine. Like we
right.
have one speed, right? It's not always like smooth and well thought out, but it's effective in a lot of ways, but it certainly isn't like that.
Right.
You know, we don't make to-do lists like make your bed. You know, you have to do it, but you don't really chalk those up as wins, right? You're just kind of you're in the thing. You do the stuff. So I think it was definitely like going through that process that kind of taught me the value of that and
Mhm.
started um, making my brain kind of work in that way more.
Yeah. Was there ever a point where you took a step back and the full picture hit?
I don't remember. I don't remember when I take in like the gravity of it all. Like, oh, like this part's gonna be with me for life. I remember thinking those things, and I remember thinking how especially like because it was the military. Like a lot of people join the military and they think, hey, I might die. Like I
Mhm.
might die doing this. I don't think, at least, I mean, I joined at 18. So I don't think a lot of people go into it thinking, hey, I might live, but I might live with like some stuff that jacks me up forever.
Right.
Right. Like
Yeah.
I don't think 18, 20, 23-year-old guys and girls, but mostly guys that are volunteering for military service are like, hey, like I might lose a leg and have to do that forever. I might be in a wheelchair forever. I might become blind. I might get a traumatic brain injury. I might have psychological struggles that plague me for life. We don't think about that.
Yeah.
We're so young. And then in training, to a degree, you're trained that you're invincible to a degree, right? That's how we accomplish our missions. Or you're coming home in a box. So you either sacrifice it all or you're just so badass that it's not going to affect you.
Right.
So, I don't think people really kind of put all of that together. There were times when I was like, oh, this is going to be a forever thing.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, that's not really what I had planned, or that does suck in some ways. So definitely, yeah, there definitely was some times like that for sure.
Did you do anything different to get through those times than what you were doing to get through the smaller problems, the immediate problems?
Well, I think as well, like I also spent 7 months in the hospital, so there's lots of people that come around and see you,
Yeah.
especially in military hospitals and VA hospitals, and especially as a paralyzed veteran. So there is Paralyzed Veterans of America. It's like a national service organization, kind of like disabled veterans or AMVETS, all those guys, right? But they specifically service veterans that have spinal cord injuries, paralysis of any kind. And a lot of their service officers have similar injuries. So it's guys that, guys and girls that, got similar injuries to you, oftentimes doing the similar work you were doing, or joined the military. So they have that common experience as well, and they're coming around the hospital and they're seeing everyone and they're checking on people and just like making sure your stuff's taken care of, but also just connecting. I
Yeah.
remember like I saw a guy, and because my thing was like my hands don't work, my fingers like I can't move my fingers on their own. um and my national service officer, who was also a former Marine drill instructor, he swung by and he's like talking to me and he's like asking me questions, and I'm noticing his hands don't work, but then he grabs a pen and he's like writing. I'm like, shit, like you he figured that out. And then
Mhm.
we start talking about other things like hobbies and stuff. And he drove like race cars, like these modified race cars at the time. I'm like, so you wait, it's like, wait, you drive? Like, not even that he drove race cars, just like that he drove. And he
Mhm.
was like, yeah, course, because there's the things that like you don't think of when
Right.
you're not around it. If you didn't know anybody that was paralyzed and used a wheelchair, you didn't know those things, right? So this is like my first, kind of introduction to it. Um, so when I did have those thoughts of like, oh, this is a forever thing, but I also had examples. I had examples of people who they're dealing with this forever thing and they've moved on and they've found ways to have like, successful lives doing it.
Right. So did you do any goal setting or was it one day at a time?
I think it was more one day at a time. Like I had like some goals, like when I was in the hospital, because they ask you to like make goals and
Right.
but I just wanted to kind of like return as much, you have like a nice window. I think it's like 30 to 90 days after your spinal cord injury, where that's where most of your um regaining of anything is going to happen, regaining of any muscle groups or, figuring that stuff out. But I was a realist when that happened as well. So I knew that like some of it wasn't going to come back.
Yeah.
There were some guys and girls that as they go through this type of injury, they're like, I'm going to walk. I'm going to walk again. I'm going to do it again. And some of them do.
Mhm.
Most of them don't. They still have that. But it's also how long do you hang on to that kind of idea? You
Right.
know, how long do you have, and to what degree do you allow that to be your measure of success, you
Mhm.
know, or your the measure of your ability to have a successful life? So if it's like, hey, I'm going to walk, I'm going to walk, I'm going to walk, and I'm not going to be happy until I walk, and I can't have a happy life if I can't walk, you might be in for some really bad disappointment, right? So as far as goals, yeah, there was like I wanted to be able to like move my arms. I wanted to be able to like hug my wife because I couldn't because it sucked because my shoulders were like all jacked up. And then it was yeah, like weight training and like you know being able to do more and more. So there were some goals like that. And then you know as I started doing more like outpatient rehab, it was just goals of like figuring out what life would look like. Just how do my wife and I kind of want to move through this world
Right.
together? And um, so there wasn't like a ton of like goals. It was just find happiness, find fulfillment, and just you know keep working towards that.
So when you say find happiness, find fulfillment,
Mhm.
coming off of being 20 something and bulletproof to the new reality, that changes
Right,
very fundamentally definitions of that. In some
right.
in some ways it
Yeah,
doesn't
no,
at
absolutely.
all. So how did you define
Yeah,
that new set of parameters?
sure, sure. Yeah, because you are, you know, on top of the world in one moment, and then in some respects, right? Like you're the biggest and the baddest in the world, and
Yeah.
you're doing your thing, and you are, you know, uh, enforcing international policy the, in the most you know, hospitable places.
Yeah.
So that's your purpose at that point. And then all of a sudden, that's not your purpose anymore. Um, so my purpose after that, I wanted, like I said, I wanted to continue to get stronger and get better, get more independent.
Mhm.
I wanted to become more independent with my wife in our life. So kind of like how we move forward as a couple.
Right.
Because I didn't want like to have like a whole network of family taking care of me, and I didn't want that. I didn't want my wife taking care of me either. Like she's my wife. Um, so it was kind of pushing through and figuring out what we wanted our lives to look like. In those ways, I found sport. I started playing wheelchair rugby, which was a lot of fun. So that like gave me some camaraderie and some fulfillment in that way.
Yeah.
um, Started working with a nonprofit to kind of like connect with newly injured military service members and veterans to introduce them to sport, which is great for them as well. So that was really purposeful. And that's kind of what I did for a little bit, was just I wanted to connect with other service members that were going through similar things,
Yeah.
and that I had gone through, and show them that, you know, at least 2, 3, 5 years out, there's a life that we can enjoy and be proud of. You
Right.
know, that's kind of where that's like the first like 5 years after my injury.
Mhm. And through it all, it sounds like your wife has been an absolute castle.
Yeah, yeah, she's badass, and she's very has always had like a very like servants like loving heart, right? Like wants to help people. She always wants to help people more than I even like can understand. Um, and that also goes towards me, which I'm very grateful for. And you know, she was just 19 when well, no, she was 20. No, 21. Yeah, just turned 21 like the month before I got injured. So imagine that, right? Like, that's wild. Um, so, but she was incredibly strong and supportive, and we moved forward very independently with each other to figure out our life, and I'm very grateful for her in those moments and in all the moments in the years after that, that
Yeah.
she continued to be supportive and understanding, and um, just you know going after it with me.
Sounds like you traded strength a few times.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, definitely. Because there's times, yeah, there's times when she's over it, you know, and there's times when I'm over it, thankfully. hasn't happened that we're both like completely tapped at the same time, but even when, there have been a couple times, and even when they are, then we just, we've cried and held each other, and then, best thing is like tomorrow's always a new day.
Mm.
Like, even like in the crappiest of it, tomorrow's going to be a new day. And you still might have to deal with some of the stuff that you're struggling with today, but you might win that fight the next day, or it might be not as bad. You may have something else to look forward to. Um, but it's not the end, right? Like it's just not.
Yeah, it amazes me looking back now how much we learned about resilience in boot camp.
Hmm.
And it's just and not in any big, huge, flowery thing. It was just once, and I think anybody who's passed any kind of boot camp or selection process or anything,
Right.
is once you give yourself over to the idea of micro goals and and,
Hmm.
and breaking the endurance into smaller chunks, it becomes
Yep.
much more bearable. So the catchphrase in boot camp in 1993, because I'm old, was you live Sunday to Sunday, meal to meal, chow to chow,
Right.
what it is.
Right.
And so that micro focus and that, okay, well, it sucks now. Let's get through this 10 minutes. Let's get through this hour. Let's get through this day.
Yeah.
And then wake up and start over is
Right.
really powerful.
Right. And embracing the suck, as we say, right? Like
Yeah.
it's still gonna be bad. Like when you're in boot camp or a selection process or combat or dealing with an injury or disability, it's still going to suck. Still going to suck.
Yeah.
But you have to let go of the things that you can't control. Like I can't control if it's hot and humid. Can't control if it's freezing cold. I can't control if the job that I'm doing requires me to, hump or walk X amount of miles, stay awake for this long, or I can't control the fact that I need someone to help me get ready in the morning because of my injury, or that I need to use a wheelchair, or that I can't just get up and go, or that, you know, I don't know, after a while, like I get tired.
Yeah.
I can't control any of those things. So once I surrender that kind of idea of, oh man, I wish it was different, or oh, well, I can change that part. You can't, dude. You just can't. So once you like surrender that part over, then it's like, okay, well, what things can I affect change in, right? Because that's the environment that I'm now in that I don't have the choice about. What can I change? I can change maybe how I move about it. I can change what I do with my time. I can change my attitude about it, and that's key, right? Like I'm going to choose, and it's not. I know, like with depression or other like mental or psychological, struggles, it's not as easy as, hey, I'm going to have a good day today. But um, if you can do that and you can like try to push yourself to in that direction, it for me, it's made it a lot better.
You sound like you might have read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius once or twice.
I've done the Daily Stoics, so
Yep.
I've messed with those. But never really did the meditation ones. But
But yeah, I mean, if you read the Daily Stoic, that guy basically rewrote
yeah,
Meditations one calendar page at a time. So
right.
yeah. Um, other than the obvious, what's been the biggest adjustment?
Um, I don't know. I think just well, the biggest adjustment I think was that I'm just not going to do the military anymore.
Right.
Like that was my plan. Like I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I'm going to do this for a long time. Um, and then all of a sudden, midway through my second enlistment, I'm not doing this anymore. I at least had 2 more years on my contract before like I have a conversation with my wife, like, hey, do we want to keep doing this? Is it
Right.
working for us as a couple? And our maybe, how do we want to build our family, or is it working for us? We hadn't even had those conversations yet. And in my mind, I was still going to do it for quite a while longer. Um, so I think the change, and I didn't know what I was going to do if I didn't do it anymore, right? Like if I had that conversation with my wife I didn't know what the answer was going to be. Like, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore, but I've always wanted to be X, Y, or Z. I didn't even have any of those thoughts in my brain. So I think that was probably, one of the biggest adjustments. And it's something that adjusted over time because you kind of get to find find your journey and find what things resonate with you, and what opportunities you might have. But I think that was the biggest thing. I just thought I was going to do this really badass fun job for a really long time. That was definitely unique. And there wasn't an opportunity for me to work in that field in that kind of context anymore.
How closely tied was the job and that life to your definition of yourself?
Oh, it was huge. I mean, 23, right? Like, and that's what I had done since I was 18. So that's just like a huge part of who you were, aside from being married to my wife, which that was still relatively new. I
Yeah.
didn't have kids, and so when you have kids, that's a huge part of your identity, like immediately. And having a spouse is too, but you kind of grow into that, I feel like, because you have other partnerships before and relationships, and that's kind of a thing that you move in together, and they're not completely dependent on you, and it's not, you know, so I don't really see, now I see it now that I'm almost 20 years married now. Yeah, like that's a huge part of my identity. But back then when I had been married for, a year and a half, it wasn't a huge part of my identity. I was very proud and very, very proud of my relationship with my wife and my marriage, and it was very important to me. But still, the Marine Corps was the main, like, I would say it was probably 80% of like who I was. And outside of my marriage, there was no Andy that wasn't like the Marine Andy, right? There wasn't just, I was just young, and that's what I did.
Yeah. I'm finding with all these discussions, regardless of background, that one of the biggest areas of struggle tied to whatever the difficulty is the fundamental changing of the self-definition,
Mm-hmm.
or the fundamental changing of status, and that really, regardless of what the precipitating event is,
Right.
that tends to shake people very, very deeply. How did you process through that?
I think also I had, we talked about this on our own, just I had different perspectives, right? So I had the perspectives of people that showed me what was possible with an injury like this, which is very helpful. I
Yeah.
also had perspective of people and it's hard to kind of like say this, um, you know, anybody that has any sort of like life-changing injury, that's or disability or sickness, something like that, that's the biggest thing that person's ever encountered in their life. So it can have the psychological and mental toll, whether it's, you lose a finger or you lose all four limbs. Like it could have a similar mental and psychological kind of impact. So I say that to say that, like, hey, like, if I've talked to guys before that are like, hey man, I shouldn't even feel bad or struggle, or I shouldn't even be getting, help from the VA or compensation from the VA. I mean, look at your injury, look at mine. I'm like, bro, it's not like that at all. Like, it's not like that. You signed up, you volunteered, and then you had an injury that's going to impact you for the rest of your life. That's huge.
Yeah.
Go get the help that's there for you. So I say that to say this. I also had the perspective of seeing other service members with injuries that I don't know if I'd be able to deal with, like traumatic brain injuries, where like, a good quarter of their brain matter is like missing, and they are no longer able to, control their body, communicate, and you don't know how much of that is just an inability for them to get the words out. But
Right.
what are they thinking inside their brain? Are they still, how much are they, like, do they know the struggles that they're having, or are they just, more, less conscious, right?
Right.
Who knows? But I know I saw those service members that had those injuries, and I know I felt very grateful because I still had my brain, I still had my eyesight, I still had my ability to speak, I had my ability to think. Um, so having to like reinvent myself or redefine myself, I knew I would be able to do it because I had those capabilities, and I felt, um, we talk about like survivor's guilt. I felt a degree of survivor's guilt because I know there's three guys that can't do
Right.
anything anymore that died the moment I got injured. And I know I've encountered hundreds of other service members that have injuries that are really, going to limit what they can do. So as I had to start thinking about that, I always had those examples in my mind, like, oh, like you can figure this out and you better figure it out because you have the opportunity to. And there's guys and girls that I'm sure they wish they did have the opportunity to, and they don't, whether it's because their injury is in a way that impacts them in those ways, or they're just not here anymore. So you're going to suck it up, dude. Like you just owe it to them.
Right.
So
That's a hell of a way to look at it. How well connected are you with all the old guys? I've seen extremes at both ends where guys that are almost afraid to visit and see you because it's visual proof that we're not immortal and
right,
untouchable,
right,
and others that just will not ever let you feel like you've left the fold, and then everything
yeah,
in between.
yeah. I think my experience, we were in a very, very small community within the Marine Corps, right? There at the time we were doing it, I think, I don't know, less than like 500 people in the whole Marine Corps did that job.
Oh, yeah.
So very small community. And I mean, I remember and it was right at the end of my deployment. So my teammates and another team that I was really close to, they were coming back from Iraq, pretty much as soon as I got out of like the real intensive care stuff.
Right.
And several of them came to see me before they went and saw their families. Not like their wives and kids, like they went and did that. But
Yeah. Well, a couple of them you can see them doing that.
Yeah, yeah. They got back and they I was in Florida at the time. And two of the guys were going down to see their families in Florida, but before they did that, they stopped by the VA hospital and saw me, and it was just, it was amazing. And a couple other my teammates came and saw me, and then I was fortunate that I was able to transfer to the VA in San Diego, where I was stationed and where all my friends were stationed. So that was great. And it was kind of like a trickling down kind of thing because they're still in their job and their environment and deploying and training and doing their thing. And just like, if you have any job and you have friends that have that job with you, and then your life changes and you go take another job, they're still your friends, but you don't see them anymore, right? Like it's just that kind of thing. But when I do talk to them, when I do see them, it's just like, old times. We have a lot of stuff to catch up on,
Yeah.
But I've always felt like, I had some connection to the guys that I was, serving with.
Yeah.
And we keep in touch. We've always kept in touch.
How important has that been?
I think it's really important. Because it was a very like formative experience in my life. A lot of them continued on to either get out and go do contract work doing the same thing or finished careers in the military, Um, so for me, having that very formative kind of experience end, and they would continue to go on to deployments and do cool stuff and live that life. So maybe it wasn't as significant to them, maybe, I don't know, but for me it was. And that's been really special to me. Um, and part of the great part of our kind of connection is now that I do something completely different from the military professionally, and I've built a career in finance that's just weird, because I just didn't see that coming. But you know, as more of my friends were getting to the time where they decided to leave military service, they were able to look at me and other guys like me that got out and just did something completely different
Yeah.
and realize that there's a whole world out there. And that brought me a lot of joy to be able to, talk to my buddies about that and say, yeah, this is what I do. I never thought I'd do it, but it's kind of fun, and it's, it works, and it'll pay the bills. And there's lots of stuff out there. You don't have to keep doing this forever if you don't want to. You don't have to get out of the military and keep doing the same job in a contracting role if you don't want to. You can do anything, right? And it's just, so that was a special part of the connection for me.
Being able to be inspirational, be a mentor.
Yeah, in a way, or just be an example of like there's other stuff. Like there's other stuff. You can do other stuff. Yeah, that was cool.
You seem really comfortable talking about about your incident, about your injury, about life,
Mm-hmm.
then, during, now, forward. Has that always been the case, or is this something that you had to build to?
No, I've pretty much always been comfortable with it.
Mhm.
I think a lot of that might be not like remembering the super gory, scary shit. Um, but I don't know. I've always been comfortable, you know, sharing about it, sharing my story, talking to people, whether they're just, everyday people or other service members going through similar things. Just, yeah, just always been comfortable with it. I don't know.
How often do people, you said everyday people, how often do just random people ask you what happened?
Maybe like a couple times a year.
Yeah.
Not like doesn't happen a lot. Um, so maybe, yeah, something like that.
Now, is that more situational based, or is it just maybe once or twice a year you run into somebody who has the curiosity and
Yeah, it's
actually
more so that it's just,
say, hey man,
people are just curious. They're like, "What's up?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." Um, yeah, that's sometimes it's like kids though too, because they don't have the
they don't have the
you
filter.
know they don't
Yeah.
have the filter. They're like, why are you in a chair? And obviously I don't like lay out the whole thing. I was like, oh yeah, my neck got hurt real bad, and so I can't move my legs, so I use my chair, whatever's like age appropriate.
Right.
But yeah, it comes up, not often, but once in a while, and I'm comfortable with it. More so, there's like opportunities where like things like this, or like if I work with a nonprofit and they're doing like radio interviews for like fundraisers, or like a fundraising gala or a dinner or a golf event or something. I'm more than happy to go and help, because they've helped me so much,
Yeah.
and they're helping so many others. So very, always happy to help them in those ways. So that's where most of the talking about like my injury and my
Yeah.
kind of life comes from. And also in work, like when I meet with clients, once they get to know me enough, but also the firm I work for, it's a disabled veteran firm. So it's part
Okay.
of the story of the firm. They kind of get it. So they don't have to like guess, like, does this guy have tattoos because he was a convict or because he was in the military? They don't have to guess that. They're like, oh, he's at least was in the military. He might also be a convict, but
It could be both.
could be both. Um, but yeah, so that's maybe some of the times. Well, but also those are clients, so it's like, how do you answer that and still like keep it? Just kind of got to read it,
Mhm. So when you get a platform, something like this, or a radio show, or whatever
Yeah.
it may be, what do you try to put out there?
One is just like you can have a great life, like you can,
Mhm.
even if it doesn't seem like you can in that moment. We're going to be here for a while as humans. And success and happiness can mean a lot of different things. It's going to mean a lot of different things over your lifetime. What makes you successful and happy at 20 isn't going to be the same thing that does it at 30 or 40 or 50, no matter what happens in your life. Whether that's you get an injury that changes what you can or thought you would do for the rest of your life or not. Like, I mean, if you think about it, the things that made you happy in your 20s, they're really not making you happy in your 40s or 50s anymore. If they are, cool. Might have to question, like, you know,
Yeah. You've
but
aged, have you grown?
yeah, yeah. So that's one thing. It's just like you can have your life is what you make it, right? And if you have a partner or a partnership, like it's you against the world, like it just is. So decide what's best for you. My wife and I, several times over our marriage, we've decided what's best for us. Might not have made our parents super happy, or might not have made our colleagues be like, oh yeah, totally, like, or our peers, like that's the best decision.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. My wife and I made these decisions on how we're living our life, where we're going to set roots or where we're going to live and what I'm going to do. And so there's that. Um, there's perspective that it can always be worse. Um, and you're everybody's, I mean, I listen to like a lot of motivational stuff, and Gary Vaynerchuk is like, big on gratitude. And he's like, imagine if you were just, there's what, like 6 or 7 billion people in the world. Imagine if you were in like the bottom, like 2 billion, you know, how crummy like their lives kind of are. And
Mhm.
we're like in the top, you know, hundreds of, we're the top like 500 million at least. Like,
Right.
you can find some things to be grateful for somewhere in your life, right? So that's key. We didn't talk about it too much um, in our conversation yet, but like when I got hurt, and I've connected with the guys that were right there, like in the patrol, and the ways in which they reacted, the decisions they made in that very critical time, um, the speed at which I got evacuated from that location, the doctors, the corpsmen, the other service members that aren't even like trained medical professionals, like formally, but just were there to do those things. Um, if any of those guys and girls weren't there or didn't do their best that day, we don't have this conversation.
Right.
So that also, to me, impressed just the importance of doing things well, doing things to the best of your ability. Like, not that you can never relax, but if you're going to do it, you know, do it because it counts.
Yeah.
So that was a big kind of like lesson that I learned. Um, yeah, but just keep going, like just keep going. Just don't stop solving the problems, right? And let go of the things that you can't change. And then that still happens. Like, I've, whenever I get my wife and I travel very differently. Like, I'm usually very calm and she's a little bit spazzed. But there have been times when I have been really stressed out, and like, because you don't know if you're going to make the flight. So I'm freaking. I'm doing all the things. I'm like on my phone. I'm like checking times, checking gates, like trying to move through, trying to see if I can like work any angle to try to move through the process easy, more quickly. As soon as I know that, like, oh, I missed a flight, this isn't the thing anymore. Like, immediately, like all that worry just goes away because I can't control that. That's done. So then it's just like turning over. Like, I don't even complain about it. It's just turning over and be like, okay, well, what flight can I get to be at the thing on time? And there's nothing wrong with the way my wife does it, but she just that that frustration will sit with her for a while, and that's okay. But I've found it helpful, and I find value in just being able to be like, it's gone. It sometimes it might seem like a laissez-faire kind of attitude, like, oh, whatever, like I can't change that. Um, but I don't know. It's worked out for me more times than it hasn't to do it that way.
Yeah, I find a lot of times when discussing, and you're touching on kind of the marriage of stoicism and Zen and a few other practices, all of which have that sort of accept what is
Right.
mentality. And a lot of the critiques of it at the superficial level is it seems fatalistic and passive.
Right.
Where I think it's actually much more active and takes much more ownership of your responses and how you move through the world.
Yeah, because you take ownership of the things that you can own,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't, I coach my son's baseball. He'll get pissed that he doesn't get a hit. I'm like, bro, I was right there and I was right there behind the plate. I was right there behind the umpire and I saw the pitches, and whether the ump called them correctly or not, you didn't get anything that you could have hit. Like you
Yeah.
just didn't. So I mean, if you want to be pissed off that you didn't like hit the ball, okay, but what parts can you own? I can choose not to swing at really bad pitches. I can choose not to get frustrated. I can choose to, if I get walked, see the value in that and make it worth it and steal second and third and home or whatever. Um, so it's not just like, oh, this is out of my control, even though it sucks and that's it, and I'm just a victim. It's these are the things that I can't do anything about, and these are the things that I can do, you
Right.
know, and it's not even just goals. It's those like leading indicators, right? Not just like the lagging ones. Like you can say, oh, I want to make X amount of dollars. I want to have X amount of success in business. I want to have X number of sales or whatever. Um, or say, you want to get a certain degree in college, or you want to get a certain grade in one of your classes. Instead of like having those be like the measure of your success, go the other way. I'm going to call 10 clients a day. I'm going to call 10 prospects a day. I'm going to study my my physics work, for X amount of minutes a day. Because if you do that, those are things that you can absolutely control. Nothing is getting in your way of calling 10 prospects a day. As long as the phone's still connected, you can do that. As long as you still have lights, you can still study for 60 or 90 minutes. So if you do those things, the lagging indicators have a weird way of working themselves out, right? Because you put in the work.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the goal setting for, I do have like long-term goals and like lagging like goals,
Sure.
end result goals. But if you don't do the first part, those little wins, like I said, make your bed. Like if you don't feel like accomplished and you feel overwhelmed, you look at your to-do list and it seems daunting. Start that to-do list with the easiest things that you're already gonna do.
Yeah.
You're already gonna do. Like, do I really need to check off that I put shirt and pants on? I mean, you're probably gonna do it anyway, but you get to put a check in the box.
You get that little bit of dopamine.
Yeah, check it. Okay, good. Now what's the next thing? Now what's the next thing? I made my bed. I did the dishes. It went. And there's times when I've been like that like overwhelmed or frustrated or just down in it, And it's like that's what you got to do. So, I mean, there's lots of lessons and sometimes it seems scattered, but um, those are just kind of ways in which I move about the world now, and it's worked this far.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you're basically quoting back everything that I'm trying to capture
Yeah.
and distill and clarify and for my own purposes. The fact that I'm throwing this on the internet just is a bit of self-revelation. It's that minor, it's that not minor, it's the micro focus. It's doing the one thing that gets you to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, and then
Yep.
all of a sudden you've got inertia.
Boom. Yeah.
That's huge. So your turn for a plug. What do you got going on? Anything that you want people to know about, look into, check out, throw money at, throw their efforts at, help out with?
Let's see. I mean, all those things, of how to get through adversity and triumph and, win at life. Identify what your goals are and be satisfied in those goals. Like, be satisfied that that's what's important to you. Like, it doesn't have to be that you buy a certain house for a certain amount of money, or you drive a certain car, or you can, it doesn't have to be that. If that's truly what you want, cool.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. I worked in finance for a while. It's been interesting and fun a lot of times. I'm moving into like starting to get involved in like some real estate investment, so that's exciting. And there's lots of stuff that I think people can probably learn about that would be advantageous to them, just as far as like, developing like lifelong assets, and just moving. You want to move if you're, no matter who you are, I'm sure you want to move yourself in a direction towards, financial independence and freedom. But especially if you have a family that you're kind of like bringing along, like you kind of want to change, you want to change the trajectory, right? Like, this is what my parents were able to do for me. Very grateful for that, because that's what their parents were able to do to them. Now I have mine. How do I kind of set them up to be able to move through the world better? Um, so I think I think financial literacy, I think understanding real estate, understanding if you live in America, understanding taxes are all probably really good things to do. I know that's like steps away from like the kind of conversation we've been having, but right now that's what I'm on. That's what I'm really interested in. Like this weekend, aside from sweating my butt off at my kid's baseball game, I read about tax strategies, because
Oh, wow.
yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
yeah, it's just I don't know. It's cool if you're gonna learn about something, learn about it, right? But yeah, but yeah, just keep, live life to the fullest. There's people that don't have the opportunities that you have, that I have, whether it's for one reason or another. And let go of, if you're hanging on to stuff that's not serving you, let go. Like, just be selfish in that way. Like, is this serving me? Is this helping me? Is it bringing me happiness? Is it bringing me success? Is it going to bring me success or happiness? No. Okay, just figure out how to let that go,
Yeah.
you know. So it's just, I was never bitter or angry, or even at the people that like caused, even at the people in Iraq that like attacked my patrol. Like, I was never angry at them. It was a war. It was what it was, right? Like, I don't see the point in that, you know. Just, it doesn't serve me. It might just keep me bitter, and it's gonna get in the way of opportunities. So it's better to do that. Yeah, those things.
I think right there, that's about as hard a mic drop as we can end on.
All right.
Dude, thank you so much for your willingness to tell your tale, for taking the time. This has been really, really fucking inspiring. Thank you, dude. This was
Yeah.
a really, really good talk.
No, thanks for having me, and it's been great to chat with you about it, and share the things, and connect, just on a one-on-one level, and I'm hopeful that some of the things we talk about today can help somebody else. So,
Uh,
but thanks for thinking of me and having me on, and
You're
look
watching
forward
this,
to
and you're not inspired, watch it again and pay.
all right, awesome, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, dude.
Bye.